It's Dr. Cassie Smith, and welcome to Back to the Basics, a simple approach to health in the modern world. I appreciate you taking the time to join me today and hopefully learn ways that could help you improve your health. The modern world has left little time to focus on health and wellness. I hope to give you some quick and simple ways to be well and live your best life. Hello, welcome back to this week's episode of Back to the Basics. I'm extremely excited about my next guest. I'm going to introduce you guys to Coach Michael Burt. Rob and I met him in February, him and his wife, Natalie, at a retreat that they do, and we really enjoyed it. I know a lot of you guys reached out to me on social media about it. It's called Living with a Monster, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. But Coach Michael Burt is the visionary force driving the Greatness Factory. It's a universally acclaimed he's an expert in his ignition of the prey drive within individuals and achieving unmatched mastery in the realm of successful monetization. He has a legacy spanning over 2 dynamic decades where he stood at the forefront of empowering top performers across diverse fields to transcend their limitations. His hallmark lies in the unparalleled ability to awaken the innate pursuit of excellence known as the prey drive, propelling individuals to relentlessly pursue their aspirations with unwavering fervor. He is a motivational and inspirational speaker. He's spoken on thousands of stages probably at this point. I read somewhere that you did 40 talks in one day, so that's pretty awesome. We can ask him about that. And so I am super happy to welcome him to Back to the Basics podcast. So thanks for being with us, Coach Burt.
All right. Thanks for having me. You took me back to a day when I was trying to break a Guinness Book of World Records, trying to do 40 speaking engagements in one day. And we did 41, actually. But it was an interesting day. We could have done a lot more if we had planned better. But, it was one of those things that you can say you did 40 short engagements in one day.
All in the same place?
It was in the same city. So we kind of prearranged businesses for me to go in and speak at, to motivate, that kind of thing.
Holy cow. 41 in one day. That's a lot. Okay. So you people that are listening to this on the way home or on the way to work complaining about a long day, think about that. 41 businesses in one day.
It was a long day.
All right. Well, that's awesome. So I guess maybe start by telling people a little bit about you. If they don't know, I'm going to link all your stuff, obviously. We met Coach Burt because my husband read his book, Flip the Switch, and then he made me read his book. And then I really liked, a lot of the stuff that he said. He talks about your prey drive. And then he has this exercise he makes you do, A to B. And then I know a lot of you guys have reached out to me. That sign in my garage, the neon sign that I always put up, that came from Coach Burt as well. So give us a little bit of background, how you got where you were, maybe 5 minutes of how you became what you are now.
Former women's basketball coach, fell in love with coaching very early in life, knew I wanted to be a coach at 15, became a coach, but I was really fascinated by the psychology of activating the drive inside of people. I was fascinated by how to build, championship teams, engineer people, and I kind of became known for that. So other coaches were always coming to me going what are you doing? How are you doing it? I was really going over to the business world, studying a lot of business, bringing it to the athletic world. And so then I started writing books about it. And that was 21 books ago. So I started writing all these books and people said, will you speak to my team and will you coach my company? And then at 31, I retired from athletic coaching to really do what I've done over the last 15 years, which is build, a multi-million-dollar coaching company.
Yeah. So that's pretty brief description probably with all the things that you've done. But, and then recently you started working. So we kind of want to talk about this. Recently you started working with your wife, Natalie, who's very sweet, amazing hostess. Yep. But you guys started working together and you started this couples retreat. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about this living with a monster concept? Because I think it goes back to kind of relationships, which is what I wanted to talk about in addition to coaching.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, my wife was joking about what it's like to live with a guy like me, driven and focused. And she used to say it's not easy living with a monster. And I just said, it's a great book title because I'm big on concepts, right? And so she writes this book called Living with a Monster. I'm big on monetization. And I'm like, look, we got to monetize this. What are we going to do to monetize this concept? And she's like, I do not want to do what you do for a living, but I will do couples retreats. So we started to do couples retreats at our house in Florida. Incredible experiences, 3-day couples retreats where we kind of combine business and relationship. You guys came to that. And so, it's opposite of therapy. It's kind of like fun business at the beach, but we talk a lot about business. So a lot of business people like it.
Yeah. And I think what Rob and I realized, what I think you guys helped us realize too, is like trying to find how as a couple, you can help each other in a relationship, right? Like instead of, it may be said that Rob has called me a monster a time or two. And so how does he, instead of being mad about that, help me become I guess a bigger monster in a good way, right? Like help you figure out how to do that together, right?
Yeah. How do you live with a driven person? How do you thrive in partnership when you're married to a driven person versus judge that other person, which is typically what happens. It's like, I don't understand you. Why are you so driven? Why are you so focused? Why don't you slow down? Why can't you relax? So there's a lot of judgment typically when you're married to very driven people, and that's just who they are. So that creates friction in the relationship. Or as a business coach, I can't tell you how many times one person said, I'm growing, but my partner is not growing. I want to go do bigger things, but my partner doesn't want to do bigger things. So that friction is created. And then it's like, hey, it's hard enough to run a small business, but now you're going home and there's another battle to fight. You're fighting battles all day running a small business, and you're fighting battles when you get at home. And I think that couples retreat really does help each other understand each other.
Yes, I would agree. So, from a coaching standpoint, why do you think it's important that people utilize coaches in their life in regards to like career paths or even relationships, health and wellness? What is your take on that?
I think people hit ceilings. I think they have blocks. I think they get to a place where they don't know how to get to the next step. And a coach has a very specific skill set, a very specific knowledge set, a very specific strategic mindset. And a coach kind of brings a structure that helps accelerate a path. I think that's why people need coaches in their life. It's like, I'd like to go do this, but I don't quite know how to do it. Who can help me? And good coaches can really help you get somewhere faster, right? We see this in sports. It's like very obvious how a good coach can take a pretty good team and win with that team. But for some reason in business, we have a hard time understanding this. It's like you have talent, but that talent is refined by a very skilled coach. And over a period of time, you accelerate toward a path. Sometimes coaches bring leadership. Sometimes they bring creativity. Sometimes they bring direction. And that really is a big benefit to you.
Or sometimes they just bring like connections, right? Or who's like your A to B, like you helped me kind of learn, right? Like trying to figure that out as well. Yeah. So have you touched on the importance of being in great physical shape with any of your, like when you coach people, do you feel like being in shape, either physical, mental, energy, do any of those things have to do with how successful people are? Or, do we need to worry about that, or does it matter?
I think they 100% matter to everything, because when you look at the whole person, body, physically, mind, mentally, heart, emotionally, spirit, spiritually, there's no surprise that the better you feel about your body and your health, the more confident you are. The more confident you are, the more boldness you have. The more boldness you have, the more you pursue your dreams. And quite frankly, it takes a lot of energy to do big things in the world. And I see so many people that don't have that energy. It's like I remember going to a doctor many years ago, similar to you, but not like you, right? But in that same industry. And it's like, what do you write down on the piece of paper? And I'm like, I want to find my super power. It's not like, hey, something's wrong with me. I'm like, I want to go to another level. Okay. And I need a lot of energy to go to another level. What do I need to do to get to that level physically? Because I see people that, don't have enough energy to walk through the airport. I see people that don't have enough energy and there's no way they could do anything big because they don't have enough energy and they don't have enough confidence, which confidence converts to boldness, and boldness converts to action. And so there's a direct correlation, in my opinion, in all of those things: body, mind, heart, spirit. But the physical component is a step to get to really go to work on your whole overall confidence.
Yeah, I would agree. Why do you think so? I've done an interview with a few people who do like health coaching, but why do you think from a diet and exercise viewpoint, it's so hard for people to be disciplined in this area of their life?
This is tough. I think the world we live in America, it's like from a very early age, we develop such bad physical habits, such bad eating habits, right? It's like from the time you're a baby, you drink juice and you have milk and you do this and you eat these foods. And especially, I live in the South where that's like the way you're raised, right? Like you eat bad food. And then it's like, okay, then one day you have a general unawareness that you're unhealthy. Okay. And I remember having dinner with, one of my doctors, and this was in 2018. And he just said, at dinner, he just said to me, "You're unhealthy." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm unhealthy?" Like, I'm traveling around the world, I'm speaking, and he's like, "You are unhealthy. And if you will come and do your blood work, I'll show you, how unhealthy you are." And so I'm like, okay. And so I go in and do my blood work, and man, I was low in everything. I was off in everything. It's like I needed him to say to me, "You think you're healthy, but you're really not healthy." Okay. And if I didn't trust him, I probably would have been offended by it. But it's like, I actually appreciate the fact that he said that to me. And that got me on a new path. That one hard conversation got me on a path to health and wellness. It got me on a path to new eating path. It got me on an education path of all the kind of things that I do now that I didn't even know. I was raised by a traditional nurse. She worked in emergency rooms. She worked in hospitals. So, when you're sick, you go to the doctor, you get medicine, right? Like, that's how I was raised, by a nurse that came up through a traditional medical system. So when I started working with some of the top doctors in the world, it was totally different. It was the exact opposite of everything that I had learned as a kid. So I think people go along their life and they don't even know. It's like when I take my vitamins in the morning, people look at me and they're like, "Oh, you take that many vitamins? Like, you take those are all the things that you take?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like this is this, and this is why I do this, and this." And they're like, "Oh, it makes sense." And so I think a lot of it is a lack of education. I think a lot of it is just kind of an ignorance to a lot of things until you're enlightened. And enlightened means to shine light on darkness.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to your point, like the problem with most doctors and most people is a lack of education, I think, which is why the only reason I started this podcast, really. I have, like you, a million things to do. But I think it's important that people get educated correctly. So to your point, your mom, or whoever,
Right.
growing up in that mindset of like you go to a doctor when you're sick, that's where I think we've messed up in this country. We need to be looking at doctors as like coaches almost, right? Like wellness health coaches. And you need
Right.
to go to a doctor when you want to figure out why something isn't working and then how to make it work better. Unfortunately, we wait until we're like almost dead, or have these terrible diseases. And then we
Right.
go to doctors, and then we expect doctors to be these miracle workers with magic wands that can just erase 55 years of bad decisions. And
Right.
that's not really how it works. Now, I'm not saying that you can't, right? There are things you can do to help make people feel better. But if people would look at doctors more as like wellness coaches, right? That can help them stay well, feel well, and be able to do everything that they want to do and have the energy that they want, then I think we would be in a better place in this country, as opposed to just going when, they feel terrible.
Well, I probably would know this if I hadn't been hired by some of the best doctors in the world, like that really have a similar philosophical belief as you. Like, I would still be probably going down that path, right? Because I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so by being over in the functional medicine part, the combinational therapy, the all these things, I'm like, okay, this is a whole new world. And here's what's interesting. Then people would come to me and say, "What are you doing? Like, man, you look so much healthier, and you're so much thinner." And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm doing this," and they'd be like, "Oh, I didn't know to do that," right? So I really do think of it like a coach. And I really do believe everybody does need a coach in their life, but they most likely need a physical coach, a mental coach, maybe a spiritual coach. They need different people who are specialists. But the truth is, when your health is not there, a lot of the things that I teach are just not possible. You just can't go do the kind of things I'm pushing people to do. You just don't have the energy to do it, right? As you age, your body begins to naturally decline. It quits producing things it needs to be successful. And it's like so you're just like, "I don't have any energy." I'm 47 and I have a 2-year-old, right? So it's like I have to go be coach to 2,000 people. Then I got to come home and be a dad to 3 kids that's running around. It's like, I need a lot of energy. And it's like, you need to get everything in order and understand the importance of that.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I'm big on, I tell my patients that I have a therapist that I see. I have a spiritual coach. I read scripture every morning. I have a book that I set in front of my red light with, and I read my scripture. And so I have my spiritual coach. I have my therapist, which I guess you call that your mental health coach, right? I have a coach that helps me as far as health and wellness. I need a business coach. I bet I know where I can find one of those. We've kind of started that, right? But I mean, I think that you need lots of coaches in life. I would agree with that, because I feel like, we don't like to do hard things as people, right? Like for me and you, like we're good at what we do, right? I'm really good at medicine. I can tell everyone what's wrong with them. I can help them figure out a way to fix it. I can help them figure out a way to, feel better. But when it comes to myself, that's when you're kind of, sometimes you get lazy, right? Like you put yourself on the back burner. And so I think coaches in general, like the reason I love my therapist so much is she holds me accountable, right? Every Thursday, she holds me accountable. And if I don't do it, she just puts it out there. Like, why didn't you do it? And so I think people need that in their life. I think a lot of people are struggling in this world because it is so chaotic. It's so crazy. There's so many things going on, and we just don't put ourselves first because we're just in a society where we don't do that.
Yeah, and I think if you serve a lot of people or you're in a role where you use a lot of energy, you kind of serve everybody else but yourself. And, it shocks me how people in the healthcare field, are some of the most unhealthy people in the world, right? It's like, man, they see the negatives of not being healthy. But, if you were a paramedic and you were working X number of hours per day, taking care of other people, or if you travel around the world and you're eating in airports, it's like, it's so easy to be unhealthy and go, well, I'll start tomorrow or next week, or it's not that big a deal. And, as human beings, if you just study human nature, we start with good intention, we fail to follow through, and then we experience guilt. And that guilt is associated with grief. We're grieving our lost potential. And then we want to start with good intention, and then we fail to follow through, and then we experience guilt. And the coach kind of comes in like your therapist and breaks that cycle. And says, okay, you're going to start it, you need to finish it. And that kind of breaks that cycle and kind of works the muscle and builds a new habit, and a lot of people just don't have that discipline. I actually hired a former MMA fighter from Mexico to live with me for 1 year. I paid him $50,000 to be my trainer, my physical trainer, my personal trainer. And he went everywhere I went for 1 year. He worked out, and this was when I was 30 pounds heavier than I am today. So I was like, I don't have the discipline to work out like I need to. He basically lived with me for a year, and everywhere I went on the road, he went with me. I would get to a hotel, he would make me work out at 10 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning. He watched everything I ate. It's like, that helped me to develop a better habit and a better discipline as it relates to working out.
Wow. Yeah. That would do it for sure. And then I think also, having a coach too, like when you complain, right? So sometimes whenever I'm like, oh, Jan, I start complaining, she's like, sounding like a broken record. Like, we talked about this and these are the things you were going to do. Why haven't you? You know what I mean? And so I think it's good sometimes for somebody to give you that perspective though, right? Because you're like, well, because I'm busy, because I'm this. Well, okay. But then those things aren't going to change if you don't start taking steps to do that. And the other thing I think, I see this as, I sort of feel like a coach to a lot of my patients. Like, sometimes people look at things like a huge forest instead of just looking at the tree, right? Like they come to me and say, I want to lose 100 pounds. Well, okay, that's a big goal. Like, we got to start with one branch at a time, right? Or even some leaves. And so I think sometimes people need a coach to help them figure out how to just break things down. This is human nature in general, right? Like, you've written 21 books. I want to write a book. I get frustrated with Rob because I've wanted to write a book for a while, and I start and he's like, well, where's your outline? Well, I do have an outline now, but then he's like, okay, well, you got to start with an outline, right? And then, okay, well, where's your intro? And so I think people just need somebody to help them figure out, okay, instead of looking at the forest, let's look at a tree or even a branch,
Yep. Yeah. And just to get into action, right? Just to take a mental creation and get into a physical action. And I think a coach does that. And we have a strong personality like you do, right? A good coach, a good strong coach can handle that personality and say, hey, like think about when you do have the book out. You got a message, you got something you want to say, and I call those because goals. They're big reasons you do things when you don't feel like it. I don't feel like writing the books many times that I write. I actually enjoy some of the process, but it is a labor of love, right? It's like it's not like at the top of what I love doing, writing the books, but I know the book gives me a message, and the message gets me in front of people, and I kind of like doodling it up, and then but there's a process to it of doing it that I don't always enjoy, but I do know the outcome of actually doing it.
Yeah, I think that's my problem with the book. I know what I want to say. I know what my message is. I know how amazing it will be if a lot of people read it because it will help them, but it's just the process of doing it, right? Like I hate writing. I never loved English. Like it's just that, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk and somebody write it for me. Maybe I need to think about that.
That's
But
possible in today's world. I mean, really in
yeah,
today's world, you could take your videos. One of my books, they took one of my online courses. They packaged that up, transcribed it, packaged it up. I spent maybe 1 hour on the book, adding stories at the beginning, maybe at the end of the chapter, and that's how I wrote that book.
yeah, I actually played with that yesterday, to be honest with you. AI, you can put stuff in AI and like talk to it. And then I worked on one of my chapters through AI and it was kind of cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's all about finding your why too, right? So I think you sort of talk about this a little bit as well, is like finding your why, right? And then once you know your why, then it's a little bit easier and you just have to focus on that. And then, when we're talking about the big forest and in a tree, one of the things that you said, I'm not kidding you, that kind of reset me and has helped me is it all goes to zero at midnight. Like you have to remember that every single day you have to start over. And I had a saying before I came, which was success is not owned, it's rented, and the rent's due every single day. But I really like that it all goes to zero at midnight. And so that is in my garage on that neon sign. Rob made it for me when we got home because when I pull into my driveway every day, at the end of the day, no matter how the day has been, like it's been a Monday, you see that,
Yep.
right? And then when I pull out of my garage every morning, I'm reminded that I got to
Yep.
start over today. Like, right?
Yeah, if you take that mindset, then no matter how much success you have, and I learned that by being a basketball coach, right? Like it didn't matter how good we were one night. The next game really didn't care about the last game. The next team didn't care about the last game. And so it taught me that we can never get complacent. It all goes to zero at midnight. And no matter how much money or wealth you accumulate, if you just treat it like that, like it all goes to zero, start over at zero again, try to get to a number again today, it keeps you out of a complacent nature. And we are a complacent nation. I thought about writing that book, A Complacent Nation, because we have had it so good for so long in the United States that people become lazy and they kind of take things for granted. And if you could ever not allow yourself to get in that state, like think of the comfort zone as the death zone, right? And that's where dreams go to die. And it's kind of a new talk I've been given lately around Prey Drive, which is if you can think about the comfort zone as the death zone, then it changes how you see that, because one definition of complacency is kind of a general unawareness that you have satisfied or got to a position that you're comfortable in and you don't even know it. Like you're just going along about life, you think life is good, but that actually is dangerous to your future, right? And you don't know it until something happens in the future. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, man, I've let myself get comfortable and now I need money to do something and I don't have the money because I got lazy and right? And it's like, I like that definition of complacency. It's a general unawareness that you've satisfied, but it is very dangerous to your future.
Yeah. And to your health too, your mental health, that's
Right.
very important to your physical health too. But if you're mentally not, in a great place where you're happy and you're content, then that's going to cause anxiety, depression, stress, and that's going to ultimately lead to, poor health as well. And I think, this is where I kind of told you I sort of blame you for the chaos of my life right now. When Rob and I came to your thing in February, I was definitely at a very complacent time in my life. I was very happy. I didn't really have a whole lot going on. I knew I wanted to write a book. I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to do an online training course. I had all these things I wanted to do to help people learn about health and wellness, but everything was going okay. I was going to work. I was seeing 20 people a day. I felt good about it. And so I just kind of had tapped the brakes and just, was going along with life. And then we came there and we did the A to B and we came home and I was like, God, I got it. I figured out I was getting I was happy, but I was getting frustrated, right? You go to work every day and you're like, well, I'm doing the same thing and I'm helping people, but I could be doing more. And you get a little complacent where like I try very hard every single patient that I see to give them my undivided attention and like to coach them, right? Like that's what you want to do. You want to give them your best because what you may say may change the trajectory of their life. Like I have that privilege as a person. You have that privilege. It's an amazing privilege. But if you get complacent, then sometimes you go into these visits and you don't give it your best. And then that can cause a friction in a relationship and it could ultimately, change the trajectory of someone's life. And so that's kind of where I was in February. And then we came home and I was like, okay, and since February, I've started a podcast and we have a building we're moving into in 2 weeks. And I have an outline for a book and starting to make a course, and it's a lot, but it's, I feel good about it because I do like, that's my purpose, right? My purpose is, I lay in bed sometimes at night and I think about if I could just make everyone in the world feel 10% better, imagine what the world would be like. Just 10%. Like that's easy, right? 10% is not that hard. It's just education. And so I think if we all had a mindset like that and we all went to work with ambitions like that, no matter what we did, just imagine how different the world would be. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good that you see that interaction as a privilege because no matter what you do, if you do it for a long time, I've been coaching for 33 years since I was a 15-year-old kid. Like that's when I actually started. Right. So it's very easy to get into that trap of here we go. It's another day, another person to help, another person wants your time. It's so easy to become cynical. Right. This one complains about this and I got to do this and I got to do these one-to-ones and they expect so much from you. And so I think keeping it in perspective and kind of reactivating that prey drive of, hey, this is a privilege. What's small to you is big to them. And paying attention to people, responding to people, being like treating every session as a new session and a new opportunity is a good thing to do because even I, after 30 years of doing something, can grow stale, right? It's like, I've done this. I could do this in my sleep, right? Now it's like, okay, what's our next big move here? And now I've started talking about what is a seat at the bigger table. See, a seat at the bigger table for you and Rob is the building and bigger plays, right? Like that's your next evolution. And that reactivates the prey drive. If you just kept doing the same thing, seeing the 20 patients for the next 20 years, you'd be like, okay, what's next? So it's like you need these things in your future that is a seat at the bigger table that gets you excited, and that excitement reactivates the prey drive. And everybody needs that. That's why I just built a greatness factory, right? It's because I needed a bigger game to play. It's like, okay, how do I have 100 of these around the country? So it's like a reactivation of the prey drive.
Yeah, I love that. So it's so true. And it just, yeah, I mean, if you keep that in mind, it's, and the other thing I learned from you, so I try to live in the gain and not the gap, right? So we talked about that because I think when I came to Florida, I was definitely living in the gap. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm happy. And there are all these things that I want to do, but I haven't made it there yet. And so I think that made it a little more frustrating. And so for listeners that don't know, Coach Burt makes you do this amazing exercise that's very easy. And I guess you can explain it to people and then I'll explain to people how you do the exercise.
Well, the exercise is probably the simplest exercise I've ever come up with, but actually has the most impact of any exercise I've ever come up with. And It's like I would coach all of these people, very successful, like you guys, and they would say to me, like, what's next? Right? Like I'm looking for my next move. And I started going, okay, let's pretend for a second you're at A. And A is your current position in life. And let's think about all the things that you're frustrated with at A. It's like it's good, but it's like there's a little bit of bother there. Like you're bothered by some things. It's like, well, I really want to do this and I really want to do this. And then if you drew a B on the other side, the opposite side of the piece of paper, you said, if I woke up tomorrow and B was as close to perfect as life could be, what would my ideal life look like? Like, what is B to you? Like, where are you going? What are you trying to do? You would be shocked how many people have never given this any consideration whatsoever. So they're just going along about life. They're just doing their thing, right? It's like, what's your B goal? And B can be a lot of things. B can be you have passive income that is greater than your living expenses. B can be you don't have one building, you have 50 buildings. B can be you guys spend 3 nights a month just with each other. B can be you take a vacation once a quarter. whatever your B is, it's 100% yours. But it gives you something to work toward, and that's the exercise we do. And most couples at the couples retreat have never talked about where they're going in their marriage. Never. It's like we got married, we do our thing. There's really no goals that we're moving toward, and I think that exercise helps people realize, man, what are we doing here? Like, where are we going? Like, what are we trying to do? Right? And that is called A to B. And I actually wrote a book on that, very small book that's 15 questions. And if you ask me, out of all of your books, which book do you read the most? And I actually personally read A to B more than any book that I've ever written.
Yeah. And I think for some people that get very complacent in life and feel like, I have patients who tell me, well, I feel like I'm, in a sorority relationship, or, I'm just like in this friendship in my marriage, or, I have this roommate, they say it like that, then you should really consider doing A to B with your partner and figuring it out, because then it kind of re-excites you as to what you're doing. Because life does get crazy and you're just, trying to go to work and take care of your kids. And then the other thing that you really taught us too is looking at, okay, instead of getting upset, because I was kind of to a point where I had given up on my B goals because I was happy and it seemed like a lot of work and it seemed like it was going to be too difficult to get there. And I was getting frustrated. And it was because you taught me I was living in the gap instead of the gain, right? So you told me, Cassie, what you're not doing is realizing all the things that you've done to get you to the point where you are now. Instead, you're looking at what you need to do to get to B, but you forgot about all the work that you did to get there, right? And so I think that's changed my mindset a lot. So when I don't want to write a book, or I get frustrated about something, like yesterday, I didn't really want to work on Sunday. I wanted to go lay by my pool and do nothing, but I thought, okay, well, what is your goal? And then what have you done to get here? And so just living in the gain instead of the gap, I think is helpful too. Do you like what you've heard so far? If so, Modern Endocrine is now able to provide telehealth services in 8 states, including Arizona, Nevada, Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and Georgia. If you would like to become a patient, visit our website at www.modern-endocrine.com/contact. You can also email us at hello@modern-endocrine.com or call our office at 405-286-1571 to schedule an appointment. Please note, we no longer accept insurance for new patients. However, we do have customizable membership programs available. Your first visit will include a detailed intake, and lab orders will be provided to further assist us in developing your 10 stages to ultimate health plan. We do offer discounted lab rates with a nationwide lab service. And now back to the show.
Yeah, everything you've done up until this point is not a loss. It's actually compounding. It's actually when you learn something, when you lose, you actually learn something. Right? Every big loss you've had, you've learned something. So or is it in the gap, or was it a gain? Well, if you look at it that way, even every bad partnership I've ever had, all the money we've ever lost on bad deals or whatever, we learned something. So in essence, even every loss is a gain. So if you ever look at it like that, and when you're very frustrated in life because you're not getting to where you want to go, look backward. Okay, what we do is we look forward. We go, right, and we live between where we are and where we want to go. So the positive of A to B is it motivates. The negative of A to B is you live in the gap between these two places. And that is a frustrating place to live. It's like, why can't I get there fast enough? And why am I not this? Because I coach people, Cassie, who will say, well, I want to be famous. And why am I not famous fast enough? And I want to write best-selling books. And why can't I write them? And I'm listening, and I'm like, listen to what you're saying. That doesn't happen overnight. You don't write Wall Street Journal best-selling books that fast. You don't become famous in a week. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's crazy what people think and how the time, right? It's like the people you see that are great have been doing this for years, and they've learned something, and they got better, and they built relationships, and they have a real hard skill. But people just think, if I just become famous, everything will be okay. And it's like, well, let's look back. Any day I'm frustrated, I remember that I was a high school basketball coach, right? I was making $50,000 a year. I never thought about money. I lived in a 2-bedroom condo that I bought for $119,000, right? And now I have $1 million condo. It's like what do I have to be frustrated about? I got a beach house, got a jet, we got beautiful family. It's like, stay in the positive zone versus the negative zone, and it's so easy for high performers to live very cynical lives. They're actually some of the unhappiest people because of they live in that gap, and that's where the unhappiness comes from.
Yeah. And the other thing too, is you have to realize when you're doing these things and when you're doing things that make you uncomfortable, that's pushing you to being a better person. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I remind myself, like when you do these things that you're kind of frustrated about, sometimes I have to do a mental reset, like, oh, I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that. Well, you have to go back and think, well, what is this, doing for me? And when you do things that are uncomfortable, it pushes you to do more things that are uncomfortable, right? So like when I first started this podcast, the first episode that I did, I hated it. I didn't want to do it. I just got in this, it was right when I got back from you. I was in this A to B and I was in this good mindset and it all goes to zero at midnight. And I really got it. I got fired up about wanting to educate somebody. The reason I actually started it was because somebody just pissed me off on social media and was just saying all these stupid things about health and wellness. And so I was like, I can educate people, And so I just did it. And it was so uncomfortable. The first one I did, I was sweating and I hated it. But then the more you do it, the more it's more comfortable, right? And so then this is hopefully preparing me to be more comfortable to write this book that I want to write when I don't want to write it, and to help educate people with these, I want to make these courses for patients and help educate providers. And so you just have to kind of relook at it like that. And it's the same thing with life too. I try to tell people, like, I saw somebody today. I saw a lady today who lost 22 pounds in 3 months. And the first thing she said to me was, I don't weigh 150 pounds yet. And I was like, are we on the same planet, sister? Like, you lost 22 pounds in the last 12 weeks and you are angry because you are not at B, right? And I think this all the time because of this, like this thing that you made me do. And Rob and I do it a lot now. We do A to B, we do living in the, gap and gain, but like she was obviously living in the gap, right? Like, turn around and look 3 months ago where we came from. And oh, by the way, her insulin was better. She was offered blood pressure medicine. She's like, I'm sleeping better. I'm actually exercising. I feel good. But all she's worried about is the stupid number on a scale. Right.
Yes.
And so that's where you really need a coach to come in your life and be like, what are you talking about? Right.
Yeah. Well, a coach is also a professional reminder.
Mm-hmm.
A coach is a professional reminder, and that's kind of how I think about it. Is, you're reminding me of, hey, it wasn't that bad. We are getting better. We are progressing. So a good coach serves a lot of purposes in your life, and people need a health and wellness coach. I mean, to me, I think everybody needs a coach in their life, but they need them in different dimensions.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe we need to think as a society differently about coaches and doctors, right? Instead of just looking at doctors as the person you go to about, fix all these symptoms that I'm having or give me a medicine. Maybe we need a whole new sector of healthcare that's just like, doctors that are coaches that help you not get to that point where you need that,
Yeah. So see that one thing, the doctor as a coach. You're seeing a lot more people today, now more than ever, that are interested in high performance. They're interested in doing bigger things. They're interested in having energy. They're interested in playing at a freakish level. They're interested, right? Like this is a trend that's going to continue, right? And it's going to continue. But as I fly around the country, I mean, I just notice how many unhealthy people are in the world. I mean, like, they're literally everywhere. And it's like, they obviously don't have the discipline to do it. And it's like, you just wonder, you just wonder. It's like, okay, what's going to happen in their life to wake them up so that they do? Because I think if you give up on your health, in a lot of ways, you give up on your wealth. You give up on a lot of things, because wealth is not just money. Wealth is like, a state of mind. Wealth is like abundance. Wealth is like, okay, I can pursue hopes and goals and dreams and ambitions. And, I think a lot of people, when they give up on their health, they kind of give up on that. They give up on a lot of things.
Yeah, I would agree. So if somebody's listening to this podcast episode and they're thinking, okay, well, where do I find a coach? Like, where do I find a life coach? Maybe they're not, super business oriented, but what are some suggestions you would give people as to where they could find a coach? And then also, like, ways that you can surround yourself with people, right, that are going to be like-minded. Because I think that's a big issue too, right? You're going to be the sum of the 5 people you're around the most. So that's what I tell people all the time is like, if all your friends sit on the couch, watch TV, drink beer all, weekend, never go outside, then you're going to be the sixth one like that. Right.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm laughing because you reminded me of a girlfriend I had many years ago, and that was her whole life. She drank beer through the week and went to the lake on the weekend. And she was a nurse, drank beer during the week, went to the lake on the weekend. And I'm like, there's no way that you and I will ever be married to each other. Okay. Like there's no hopes, there's no dreams, there's no ambitions, there's no, like there's nothing here other than me just to look at you. Right. And she was pretty
She
to
must
look
have been
at.
pretty.
She was really pretty, and that was the only thing she had going for her. And it's like, okay, this is not going anywhere because there's no ambition here. And it's like that's not a life I want. Okay, so that's not attractive to me. Maybe attractive to somebody else, but it wasn't attractive to me. So when you think about it, it's like I tell people, read what you need. First step is it's like, okay, I'm interested in getting better. What do? I read a self-help book. I'm interested in playing at a higher level. I listen to a podcast. I'm interested in right now finding a coach. A lot of people think of me as a life/business coach. I think I'm a business coach that has a lot of like anchoring in life coaching because I studied under a guy named Dr. Stephen Covey. Covey was more of a life coach/business coach, and that's where the pedigree of where I came from. So I understand the whole person theory. I understand how to tap into the drive of a person. I understand a lot of that, and I understand confidence, how to build, maintain, and protect people's confidence. So a lot of people see me as their coach, and we can talk business and we can talk life, right? So, but I think start reading what you need. It's like I'm interested in this. All right, let's go find a book on that. Who is that? How do I work with that person? How do I work with that author? How do I go to a conference with them for one day? It's right. Like you guys are like, okay, let's go to this business couples retreat. And you showed up. And I'm like, where did you guys come from? They're like, well, I saw you on a podcast. And I'm like, okay, super. It's like, you saw something that could help you and you took an action. Do you know how many people saw me on that podcast that didn't sign up for something? And they're just out there just watching podcasts thinking the podcast is going to change their life. The podcast is not going to change their life. Me watching you on a podcast is not going to change my life. It's going to open my mind. Now, me working with you as my doctor could change my life. Everybody see the difference there? It's like the podcast opens your mind. Working with a person changes your life. Okay? It's like a speaking engagement doesn't change your life. It opens your mind. Working with the person over a year cycle that you see speak could change your life. So that's a fundamental belief that I have.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So what is one piece of advice you'd give someone who knows they need to or are wanting to make a change, but just can't seem to pull the trigger for whatever reason? Like, what would you tell that person?
I'd go back to it like Atomic Habits. Start with one small thing. The story in the book of the guy getting up in the morning and going to the gym and staying 5 minutes, most people laugh at that. It's like, well, you can't get in shape in 5 minutes, but you did get your big booty out of bed. You did get dressed. You did drive to the gym. That is forming a habit. And it's like if you could just, when in doubt, take an action. When you don't feel like doing something, do something. Like anytime I get static, I'm like, I need to get out and move. The word motivate means to move. I don't care if you get out and walk. I don't care if you get out and go to the gym. You ride a bike. You do something. It's like you just, when in doubt, do something. Never do nothing. That's one of my golden rules that I write about in the book, Flip the Switch. It's like, I don't know what to do right now. Do something, right? When in doubt, take an action. That is a good thing for people to do.
I would agree with that. That's what I tell people, do something. And then I always bring it back to what is your why? Like if you know your why, it makes it easier to do it, right? So if we're talking about health and wellness, is it you want to be around for your kids, you want to be able to play with your kids, you want to get on the floor with your kids, you don't want to snap at your kids because you're tired, like knowing your why and just doing something, I agree with you, will get you far in life. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Okay. And then one other question I want to ask you is, how do you approach and handle conflict in marital relationships? Like, do you have any good advice about that? Since you work with your wife now and,
Well, Natalie likes to remind me that she's not paying me to coach her. It's like when I go to give her coaching, she's like, I'm not paying you to coach me. It's like I'm her husband, and I'm like, but some of the best people in the world do pay me to be the coach. And, but I'm her husband. So my wife came to me and she said, I want to be in a women's coaching program. Like, I want to be coached I want to be in a group with other top women. Right. And I'm like, 100%. Like, I think this is great for you. Helped her confidence, helped everything about her. So when we get in conflict, which is not as much as you would think, like the conflict we get into is because I overcommit to things. And it's like the answer is yes. And then what is the question? It's like, oh, you're going to be gone for 5 days. Do you remember that you have kids? Do you remember that you haven't been home? Do you remember that I'm your wife? You know what I'm saying? Like one joke we have when I'm on the road is if she doesn't call me or I don't call, I'll call and I'll say, remember me? I'm your husband. And she's like, he's like, remember me? I'm your wife. And it's like, because my tendency is I'm somewhat of a workaholic or have been in my life. So early mornings, late nights, weekends, sometimes I can get way out there. And she's like, look, this is very important, right? Like our marriage is important. It's not just a thing. It's not just a business deal. And so I think that's really when we do have conflict, it's because I say yes to too many things. And then I typically complain about it. And then she's like, well, you can't say yes and then complain about it. So quit doing it. So I think that's the conflict that we have. And typically she's right. My wife is right most of the time about these things.
Okay. So don't overcommit. And yeah, it sounds like she's married to a monster. Yeah. So yeah. So I think a lot of it, she is married to a monster. And so a lot of it too, I think, is how you approach like surrounding yourself with people who will bring you up. So like when you bring up Natalie, like making sure that she's surrounding herself with good role models and people that will, bring you up and not put you down. Right. So the interesting thing about this is that my lesson today, my spiritual lesson today, was actually talking about women and how they are mean to each other. It was called Mean Girls. And it was talking about how women in general were very mean to each other and we're quick to judge each other and put each other down. And what we really are supposed to be doing is lifting each other up and providing each other, compliments and figuring out how we can help each other. And I don't know why it is that women are like that to women, but it's true. Maybe it was just that my, spiritual book is about, it's meditation for women, but just making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who do that, right? Who hold you up, who support you. And I will tell you that I've been working on that a lot the last 6 months, and it makes a big difference. Like I've found a friend who does very similar things to me. She's a great provider. I can complain to her. She'll listen. Yep. She understands, but then she always, motivates me. I have a great new nurse practitioner who is Summer. She's so motivational, always in a good mood, sends me great, positive vibes, like things like that help. Surrounding yourself with the right people, right? Who cheer you on, who, are always like telling you, you can do this, do this better. Hey, like even Summer sent me a list of questions she wanted me to ask you. Cause I actually turned Summer and her husband on to you. Rob did on Friday. We were out with her and her husband is, just kind of feels stagnant. And so Rob was like, you got to listen to this guy. So I think her husband's already started reading your book, but she was like, I want you to ask Coach Burt this, and I want you to ask him this. And so just surrounding yourself with people who are, holding you up and cheering you on, I think is a big step in the right direction. Finding those people are sometimes hard, but
yeah. And you got to seek those people out. And I think everybody needs a good friend who will tell you the truth. Who will just tell you the truth. And I do have that. I have two good friends who will tell me when I'm not being a good husband. They'll tell me when I'm not being fair. They'll tell me when I've gotten too busy being fabulous. They'll tell me when it's like, they keep me grounded, and to them, I'm not Coach Burt. I'm not the guy that you watch on Instagram. I'm Michael. And it's like, I grew up with these people, and they'll be like, hey man, let's bring it back down to reality here. You know what I'm saying? And I think you need people in your life who'll do that for you.
And you probably need a good coach too that will do that as well. That's, outside perspective, holds you accountable. So,
yep, 100%.
Okay. So then in summary, you do think it is important that people that are especially high performing, but anyone in life, have a coach. It's going to help them succeed. It's going to help them do better. It's kind of what I'm hearing. Yeah. Okay. So if anyone is interested, we're going to put all of Coach Burt's stuff, his show notes, or under the show notes. So we'll link his social media. You should watch it. It's great. I've read, I think, almost all of his books now. And then Rob and I are going to go to see the Greatness Factory. It's beautiful. So any of you listening that have a business that feels stagnant or stuck, Coach Burt probably has a plan or a program for you. I have 3 questions that I end my podcast with. So they're easy, nothing too crazy. But what is one, and this is kind of health related. So what is one food that you feel is very beneficial and why?
This is not fair. When you're talking to a doctor, it's like, what food is beneficial?
Well, and I get a lot of answers. It's just for you. It can be for whatever reason. Like what food have, and I also do this because I want to know what other people have learned from an educational standpoint, right? Because there's so much out there. So like, what is something that you've heard that was educational that you try to eat and you feel it's beneficial and why?
I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know, like a protein, like I don't know if I eat proteins. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things I probably eat. It's like I think that's healthy, but maybe it's not healthy. Like I was eating something the other day, and Natalie's like, that's not healthy, right? And I'm like, well, hold on, I thought it was healthy, right? And
What
she's
was
like,
it?
it was some kind of shake that I was like taking. She's like, well, that's not healthy, and I'm like, well, I thought it was healthy. Like it seems healthy, and she's like, no, it's not healthy. So I got a degree in health in undergraduate, but I didn't pay attention very well. So I need
Okay.
a lot of in that area.
A lot of the answers we get are like blueberries, eggs,
Yeah.
avocado, things like that. But I'm
Is
sure you have a
avocado
list.
is avocado, is that a good or bad?
So I think avocado is great. So the problem I think that people have is we discredit fat in this country. Everyone says fat is bad. I eat so much fat. I tell people this all the time. Like if fat was bad, people, I would be a big blob of, I mean, I eat like 130 grams of fat a day. I eat avocado with almost every meal. I put olive oil on everything. I love salmon. I eat nuts. I mean, fat is good
Yep.
for you. It's from a satiety standpoint. Women need it to
Yep.
metabolize and make estrogen. So no,
Yep.
I think avocado is wonderful. I like the way it tastes too. And then just a little tip, if you don't like protein shakes because you don't like the consistency of them, like some people don't like whey, if you put a tiny bit of avocado in a shake, it changes the consistency and it makes it like a milkshake. But
Wow.
you can't taste the avocado. It's just a
Okay.
consistency thing. So,
I like that. See, that's a new thing for me.
okay. So what is one easy health tip anyone can do for free? And this can be based on, I mean, you said moving, you like to move, but what is one easy health tip you think
I,
anyone can do that's free?
I think pick something that you enjoy. Maybe when it comes to working out, I like boxing. That's my preferred like cardio. I think it's a little hard on my shoulders, but I do enjoy that. So I was like, when I'm exercising, I like picking things that I enjoy, and I like after a good 10 rounds of boxing, I feel like I really did something. So pick something you enjoy versus something you think's miserable.
I like that. Yeah. Make sure you're happy because happiness is important as well. Yeah. And then
Yep.
what's one thing you wish you would have known 10 years ago about your health that you would have done differently?
I mean, everything. I wish I would have met that doctor. I mean, I really wish I would have met. I think I thought I was healthy because I wasn't like way overweight or I didn't, you know what I'm saying? Like I actually was a false positive. I thought I was a healthy person and I really wasn't a healthy person. And even when I look back at pictures of me in 2017 or 18, it's like a totally different person. It's literally like a totally different person that I'm looking at then to today. So I wish I would have known that really a lot earlier in life.
Yeah. And I think people become complacent, like you said, right? Like you slowly start to gain weight or you slowly start to not work out or you slowly start to sleep less. And so you don't realize it because you look at yourself in the mirror every day. But when you see that person you haven't seen in 3 years and they're like, whoa, or you get some sort of, that happens with me with patients sometimes I haven't seen in a couple of years, then kind of the truth, right? So that
Yep.
complacency is just something that we all, get accustomed to. But they say in Atomic Habits, I love that book. Like if you miss an exercise one day, that's okay. But if you do it twice, you're working on breaking a habit. So like, I remember that. I love Atomic Habits. And I think about that every day. Like this morning I slept in, I didn't work out. I worked out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was tired, but tomorrow morning,
Yep.
you better bet my butt's getting
That's
out
right.
of bed because if I miss it twice, then Wednesday morning is going to be 5 times as hard to get out of bed. Right. So I
Well,
completely agree.
it becomes easier. Every day you don't do it, it becomes
Mm-hmm.
easier to do it. It's kind of like coaching. I owned a gym for a period, just a small period of time. I owned an F45 gym, and I noticed a lot about habits. The first day a person misses, if they miss 2 days, then 2 days turns into 2 months, and then the next thing you know, they want to cancel their membership. So it's the people who show up consistently that build the habits. And it's like, I get it, man. One day you don't feel like doing it, then one turns into two, and two turns into 10. The next thing you know, it's like really hard to get that thing going again.
Yeah. And I think that's where a coach is really important, because they'll hold you accountable for that, right? And so if you have a health coach or an exercise coach and you don't show up to, if I don't show up to the gym today, my coach is going to be texting me like, hey, if I don't show up tomorrow, I hope they're driving their butt to my house and ripping me out of bed. Like, that's the kind of coach that I want, right? Like, what are you doing? Let's go. So, I mean, that's what you need, accountability people in your life, because sometimes, life is hard. And I try to remind myself that, like, I'm really hard on myself. I'm sure you are too. You're a type A. And so whenever I start screwing something up or maybe don't do something great, I can get really hard on myself. But then, I remind myself I'm that person that helps somebody 99% of the time, right? I saw 20 people today, and I'm hopefully the person that keeps them accountable. And so you just have to give yourself a little bit of grace, but you have to surround yourself with the right people to keep you going in the right direction, right? No matter who you are. Because, like, even you, I'm assuming you have a coach. Do you have coaches?
I do. Yes.
Like, what type of coaches?
Different coaches for different things. Like right now I have a business coach. I've had obviously personal trainers. I've had spiritual coaches. I've had writing coaches. I mean, you name it. It's like, what do I need? And who can help me the most right now? So there's always a season of a coach in my life doing something. Like right now, it's a coach who's helping me package my intellectual property, decide how I want to bring it to the marketplace. We kind of play pitch and catch each month. It's very valuable.
That's awesome. So in my opinion, in my mind, Coach Michael Burt is like the best person in the world that could do that. Like, he's the person that you would go to help you package your intellectual property and figure out how to sell it to the world. Yet he's telling me that he has a coach. So now my mind is blown. That helps him do that, right? So no matter how good you are at something, my point is, no matter, the greatest people that are good at whatever they're good at, they still have coaches as well. So I think that, us lay people like myself need to realize that like, if we want to get better, even people that are really great have coaches.
Right. That's right. The best can always get better. Right. Yep. The best can always get better, and the best always want to get better. So that's why they have coaches. It's not because something's wrong with you. It's because you really have a desire to do something at a bigger level. That's the ultimate reason we need coaches.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I really enjoyed having you. I know my listeners like a little break from just health and wellness. And so I think hopefully they'll get a lot out of this as far as why coaching is important and what it can do, as far as health and wellness, but just in general in your life as well. So thanks for coming. And then Rob and I will come and see the Greatness Factory, and we'll put some stuff on social media when we're there so people can see it. We'll link all Coach Burt's stuff in the show notes. Make sure that you tune in and listen next week for our next episode of Back to the Basics. Have a great week. The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.